Okay guys, I'm excited to share that I finally finished my dream studio setup. Well, at least I think I did. So for most creators, I feel like we always have this issue of constantly changing our desk setup, and a lot of that is probably because we keep watching YouTube videos. But for me, I realized that my productivity has drastically dropped. So I scoured YouTube to figure out the best and the most productive way to get stuff done. So let me take you around real quick. Okay, so first things first, the desk. No surprise here, typical Creator 101, you get the butcher block with the 2 IKEA stands. So typically I use this setup for, everything. Everything from recording my solo podcasts, of course editing the actual video podcasts, and usually I have all 3 screens going at a time. So it's powered by my iMac, but I have 2 HDMI cords hooked up to these Dell monitors so that way I can have 3 screens. Now, if you watch my podcast, my solo podcast, this is typically the angle that I use when I do end up having guests on my show. It's typically virtual, so I'll send a link using ECAMM Live, which is a really great Apple-only platform for streamers and podcasters. Definitely take a look at it if you thought about doing live streaming or even virtual guests on your podcast. I'll leave the link in the description below. I put in this fake wood wall right behind me, and usually I'll have an accent light or something. Kind of like that, just to clean things up a bit. Now my main light, my key light, is what you're seeing here, and then I have a hair light that's right behind me. Usually I'm not holding the camera, so I have another Canon M50, which is what I'm shooting right now, but this is the actual camera that I use for my podcast. And if you're curious about what this is the Elgato prompter. This thing is a powerhouse. You can actually put your script on screen and essentially just kind of acts as a dual monitor. But when I'm having my guests on, their face shows up right there. And all my podcasting gear is actually hooked up to the Rodecaster Pro, which is feeding in to my Mac at all times. And this is really just my audio interface I use for everything. Even if I want to watch YouTube videos, I'm listening through my headsets that's actually hooked up to the Rodecaster Pro. And what's great about this is if I do have guests in studio, I can have up to 4 microphones from the Rodecaster Pro, including the main microphone that I use here. And then when I have my guests on my show, they sit right there. Now, if you notice, this is my second desk. So typically I only use this if I have long projects or long editing to do. I got another microphone here just as a different angle for my podcast, or if I have guests. And then I have my Deer Run walking treadmill and standing desk if I want to get work done here. By the way, shout out real quick to Ember. I got my wife this for Christmas and I steal it almost every day. It heats up your coffee with an app. This thing is sick. So anyway, I'll leave that below if you want to check that out. Now, one thing I really might get into a little bit more on a separate video is Notion. So this has completely changed up my workflow. You probably hear a lot of creators talking about Notion, but for me, I've been very impressed. And of course, they're not sponsoring this video yet. But what I love about Notion is I actually used to use the Notes app and it was a nightmare. My wife would always make fun of me because every time I had an idea or something happened, I would just throw it on Notes and then eventually I would try to build a script off that inside Notes, but it gets scrambled and it gets confusing and I end up having 25 tabs open at a time. So Notion's actually allowed me the opportunity to create projects based off the ideas that I have, and maybe I'll do a separate video on that, but anytime I have an idea, I throw that in the ideas tab, and then when I start a project, I put that in the project tab, so that way I'm not doing so many things at a time. That's the one thing I realized in 2023 that I was doing, which is instead of creating 1 video per week on YouTube, I would come up with 5 or 10 ideas per week, but I would start like 3 or 4 of them, and I would never complete 1 per week. And as we all know, if you want to constantly grow, you want to be consistent with content. Let me know in the comments below if you actually use Notion and if you want to see a full video on how I optimize my workflow. But I got everything pretty much powered by my Stream Deck. So if you don't have a Stream Deck, this is great because it actually controls not just my key lights, but it controls my guest monitor every time I do my podcast. So that way I could just switch back and forth. Now for microphones, I got the Shure MV7X. So these are actually for my podcast. But as you can see, I'm not using those right now. I'm actually using the Rode Wireless Go Pros. These things are a game changer because not only can you use them on the go like I am, but you can even hook it up to your phone. They come with all the adapters and the cords that you need, as well as a charging dock for not just the 2 mics that it comes with, but the receiver that I'm actually using for my Canon right now. So if you're a content creator, you definitely need to check that out as well. Now this is usually just my idea board, so typically I'll write down any ideas that I have for clients or for maybe content that I can't get to today. I put this on the board so that way tomorrow morning when I walk in, it's all on here. It's just kind of run off or ideas that I might have on the whim and I'm not around my laptop. Now something I'm not typically proud of is also from IKEA, where I keep the things I barely use, cords, attachments, camera lenses, but I wanted kind of something cool. But then once I hung it up on my main wall, I realized it kind of looks ugly. I haven't really mastered how to do this properly. However, I got these awesome lights on Amazon that I'm like in love with. Check this out. So it lights it up. Super cool looking, and they're controlled by a remote. You can control the temperature, the brightness, and it kind of gives me like a good like dark feel when I want, or if I need to light it up to actually find something, I just press a button, boom. And I actually have two. See, if you're a creator out there, you probably have changed up your desk setup like every 6 months. And I realized I was doing that myself too, but turns out the reason we do that is that's a form of procrastination, which I think I might have known, but subconsciously I was trying to block that. But I gotta say, ever since I cleaned up my desk and made things a little bit more accessible, cleaner, and more importantly, setting up everything for me to create. I used to have things stashed away in drawers and closets, but now that I have everything out, hooked up and ready to go, it's allowing me the opportunity to kind of create more content faster, because I realized once I was like hooking everything up, I wasn't making the content. By the time I got done hooking it up, something else came up for a client, or maybe I had to record a podcast or I had a call or something like that. But having this set up, I feel like I'm gonna be able to create a lot more in 2024, and I'm really excited. So I hope this short video allowed you the opportunity to kind of take a look at my space, as well as some of the products and gear that I use. I get asked all the time what type of podcast equipment or what type of mic you're using. So of course, I'll leave everything in the description below if you want to check out my Amazon storefront, where I've labeled it Podcast Studio, so you can see all the mics, the cameras, all the different gear I'm using, and perhaps it might work in your space. So leave me a comment below on what your favorite piece of gear was, and did I miss anything? Should I implement something else in the studio? What are you guys using? And with that, I wish you a happy and healthy 2024. Now let's get to work.